kind of sorry, a couple minutes late. Just getting the last bit of everything together. Today I'm going to be working on a turtle tote that I had a customer order. And this is actually one of my patterns specifically. This is the pattern turtle from Turtle Designs, Total Turtle Tote. I can show you what one looks like. Let me grab it real quick. Of course, it's over here, out of the way. I apologize. I'm going to grab it and I figure out where. Well, it got moved, so I will show you all that later. But the Total Turtle Tote, it is pretty good sized tote. It's about, if you go lengthwise, it's about that long, about that wide. And like I said, I don't know where mine got put at the moment. Oh, never mind. I do see it way up on the top shelf. Um, I can grab it real quick and I can show you. But the Total Turtle Tote is this particular customer is wanting to have it for her crochet to make crocheted blankets. If that kind of gives you an idea of what it can be used for, I use mine for like when I take sewing trips and things like that. Okay, so easy enough for me to pull down. Now, mine actually has a clear vinyl top. And if you've been with me before, you know I also designed the cube pattern. And this will actually hold several of the smaller sizes of the cubes inside of it. So just to show you, it does actually hold 2 medium and 3 small cubes inside of it. So I will set that to the side. And so I'm going to be doing one that I had a customer's like, "Do you have this fabric?" Because they are big Harry Potter fans. And so then we've talked it out, and I'm designing one that's based off of her house colors. Welcome. And I don't have poodle fabric, but that doesn't mean I couldn't find poodle fabric. So, like I said, we have our Wizard's Welcome. This will be the front of the case. And I don't always do something on the bottom, but in this case, I also put an embroidered wand in the house colors. So I'm going to be putting this together. Like I said, this is the actual what I'm putting together. Now, she requested her straps to be a little bit different. Instead of going where you carry it like this, she wants it where you carry it up and down and also a crossbody strap added that I don't normally have on there. But that's not an issue for me to add. And I'll talk about how you do adjustments for that later. But I'll show you all the materials I'm using for this bag. So you see the inside fabric, which is in this case, it's a Harry Potter Disney mashup I've had for a few years. I have the webbing that I have for this. It's actually because she is a Gryffindor. I have this awesome webbing from Emporium Threads, and it's like it has the lion, it says chivalry, nerve, courage, and bravery. Welcome, Annette. And of course, the same for the other one. And I do have other houses I can get as well. This is the zipper tape, which of course looks like the tie that they wear for their house. And these are the zipper pulls. I have a little Harry Potter and the little Gryffindor lion. So lots of Harry Potter references, of course. So for the turtle tote, it has it is a very structured bag. It does carry a lot of weight. I've put a good bit in mine and carried it. I've put extra rivets and stuff in the straps just to make sure it's very strong. That's probably the best way to support the weight of something that large. So now I did go ahead and interface the lining with SF101, as you can see here. I've lined it, and I've already done a preemptive starting of the thing. There is the way you put this together is that you have the four sides, and they are all sewn separately. So we are taking our lining with the front and the two sides, and we sew them together. So if you see, and unless I tell you differently, all of my patterns are sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But I've already done that and top stitched them, if you can see when I zoom in. And I've also done that for the exterior, which is just a plain black, can't talk, black vinyl. And so you can actually see the stitching and the top stitching. And like when I do the cube, you don't have to do all that because you can actually have one continuous piece, but because you need to have the extra structure, every single piece that has a piece of Peltex, or you could use Decavol Heavy if you wanted to instead, but I personally prefer Peltex in it. So you can't tell on the top and bottom because I've already made a sandwich, but there is actually Peltex in between, and I've kept it out of the seam allowance, but it is in between um, the lining and the exterior. All right, so today my plan is to get the gusset of the bag done, and that is where we will add our zipper tape to this. We will put our stabilizers or the Peltex in for each one of these sections, and we'll attach the back because you don't do all four at the same time. You do the three, and then we do the zipper, and then you do the four because you have the back part that does not have the zipper. And just to illustrate that, I will show you. So if you look here, this is you could think of it like a seam of a book. You have one side that does not have the zipper and the other three that do. So what we do is the zipper first. So we'll go ahead and start sewing that. So I'm going to go ahead and take y'all to the sewing machine. And what I always do first is I take the lining and and yes, I have the zipper pulls on my zipper tape. I'm actually going to pull them off because they get in my way while I'm sewing this. Before I add the back, that's when I'll put on my zipper pulls back on. And I just do it so I don't have to constantly move the zipper pulls while I'm sewing. So I have about a 1/2 inch over what I needed for zipper tape on either side. And I do that on purpose. So I have a little bit of extra. And you can see on that end. And I'm just going to baste this together with 1/8 of an inch. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick it under the machine, and then I will switch off to just so I don't drop it. Okay, so we're just gonna baste this together with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And because this is a permanent stitch, I do back stitch mainly because I don't want this to move at all. And anytime I say you have basting and it's not going to be seen, not you don't need to worry about taking it out. Why not go ahead and make it the right amount? I just realized my stitch length was like at a 1.5 instead of a 2.5. I've been quilting today, so um yeah. Let's just say my things were a little narrow because I was doing some paper piecing quilting. So I have to have it smaller to be able to take all those paper pieces off the back of what I'm quilting. Hope everyone is doing well today. Make sure if you have any questions, you feel free to ask. And so you can pin this. I am not. And I am doing the wrong side of the zipper tape to the right side of the lining. Basically, this is going to become a zipper sandwich between the lining and the exterior. Now, when I attach the lining, I do make sure, because of this constructionist one, you have to make sure the seams of each of the three parts perfectly match up with each other. So that's one thing. I will actually clip the vinyl to the, whereas in like my cube, I don't, because it has a similar construction, not exactly the same, but similar. So if you've ever done my cube, you just think about it that way. So sorry. All right, so we have our zipper tape attached. And now what we're going to do is we are going to take our exterior and we are going to attach it to a thing. So the biggest things that your seams, and like I said, your seams, you have your seam of the lining and you have your seam of the exterior. You want to make sure they perfectly match up with each other, because we are going to, once we get this sewn and top stitch, we are going to stitch in the ditch to make basically like little channels. And so because this is a um brain's not want to work, vinyl exterior, we don't want to use pins. Like, we could use pins on the lining, but since this is a vinyl exterior, I've got my little thing of pins. Not pins, clips. And I'll just clip it. And because I, excuse me, vinyl is can be known to stretch slightly. So we want to make sure it's very secure in place. And that's why we have to make sure, if we have a vinyl exterior and either a woven or waterproof canvas interior, that we clip it so that things don't like to move. You can guess I've had that happen before. And then you spend time seam ripping, which is not fun. All right, so we're going to match up our other seam because we have two sets of seams on these. And I'll clip the seam first. And we're just clipping all the way down. I will get the inside interior part clipped too, but I'm just making sure everything matches up here to the end and clipping it to make sure it's all where it should be. Hope everyone is doing well tonight. I will say, if you need a decent movie to go see, went and saw the He-Man movie yesterday, and I thought it was pretty good. It's definitely a tribute to the 80s babies, because I grew up with He-Man and She-Ra. So, all right, so now I've got the two side things clipped. I'm going to do the middle. And we will sew this together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Like I said, most of the time, unless I say differently, I will use a 1/4 inch seam allowance for most of my sewing in my patterns. Occasionally, I use a 1/2 inch, sometimes a 3/8, just depending on what's needed for that pattern. But for this particular one, pretty much the whole thing is done with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we do have binding, which I haven't made the binding yet. Wasn't thinking about it, but I can. And then I drop a clip. And one more. All right, so we have clipped all the way down where our lining and exteriors are equal to each other. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take it to the machine and sew it with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I will move y'all to the machine. And apparently I missed trimming off a thread a minute ago. Not a biggie. It's just out in my seam allowance now, so it won't pose an issue. All right, so we're going to sew this. And a lot of times when you are sewing with vinyl, you will increase your stitch length just so it doesn't perforate the vinyl as much. I usually sew mine using a 2.5 to 3 stitch length. And since this is a big bag, you will see my piece hanging down a good bit. I just try to keep it out of the way or keep it up in my lap a little higher so that it doesn't pull, and change how um, it's sewn to the lining. But like I said, with not having the pulls on the zipper tape, then I can just sew without having to go, okay, let me reach in there and move the pull out of the way and then move the pull out of the way again. Saves you a little bit of time. So we just go a little bit at a time. We're about halfway done. About to say it looked like my bobbin run out. I was like, it shouldn't be. I had a pretty much brand new bobbin. But we are going through. A little bit at a time. All right, so now we are, and my zipper tape's trying to move itself downwards. And I'm, same thing as with on the other side. It was starting to drag it down some. So we are going a little bit at a time to make sure things don't stretch or move. While I hold it down while I'm sewing before I get to the next clip. Yes. So that one is done. So what we do now, we're going to take this and we're going to make them wrong sides together so that when you do this, you see our zipper tape is on the outside and there's our lining. So what I'm actually going to do is kind of like we did before. I'm going to match up my seams. Like I said, it does become important when we are doing a stitch in the ditch to basically make a channel for the Peltex. So it's very important that you line these up so you don't have your seams just go all willy-nilly. So I always do the seams first, and then I move to the sides, and will actually clip all the way down as well, just to hold it in place when I do the top stitch. And I'm going to trim this thread. All right, so we are going to clip this, and I do this so that it is holding it in place. I'm going to go all the way up and then all the way down across the bottom. I'm not stitching all the way across the bottom just yet. That will be after we get the Peltex inserted. We're going to do both ends like that, and that's to make sure that our lining is equal with our exterior. and get this clipped. And I'm going to clip it all the way down, but I'm not going to. And if you see, I will kind of finger press here just so that it lays flat. But one reason I'm doing this is that I don't have to do that as much. I will do that as I go across the top underneath the zipper. This is just to hold the fabric in place while I do the top stitching. So, because sometimes when you're doing this, the fabric will rise up and then it will not be equal with the exterior. You can tell I've done that before. It's annoying. Let's just put it that way. Things don't stay where they're supposed to, and then you have to take things out or redo them, and that's never fun. So right now I am just clipping this. I said, we're not trying to get the whole bag done today. This will probably be a 2 or 3 week thing. Right. Get this last little bit clipped to hold it in place. And then I will take the clips off after we've done the top stitching. Okay. So we have our exterior and then our interior. So what we're going to go is the way I do this is that I will go up this side, then top with an eighth of an inch seam allowance, and I will actually top stitch with an eighth of an inch all the way down, and then go back down the other side and then stop. Okay. So I will move y'all to the machine. And if you see me do this, then I actually like using, I know a lot of people are like, using vinyl, that makes it really thick. It does, but if you have quality marine vinyl, and this is from marinevinylfabric.com, that's my favorite to use. It's a quality marine vinyl. It's not overly thick. I've done thicker vinyls. Those are bare. But this one, it's very malleable, which makes it not as bad as you would think to sew through. Like I said, I'm going under the zipper tape right now. And here's another reason I don't like putting my pulls on until I'm done with the zipper. Or at least now in the main body, you have to move the pulls because you're attaching a top and bottom. But for this part, I don't need to have them on there because I can still access either side. So before I put the back on, though, I will add the zipper pulls. Otherwise, you end up seam ripping, which I have had to do before, and I don't suggest. So if you don't have your pulls on like I don't, make sure you don't forget to put them back on. But at this point, this makes it turn into one singular piece. And so basically, this comes the front side or the zipper gusset for the bag. So as you see, I'm pulling it tight so that it is laying flat. And that's one reason I clip at the bottom, even though I'm not sewing across that, because I want them to be at the same height. And if you're not constantly having to check, oh, is it the same length and everything? If I clip them, it's not going to move. Right, so we're starting to get where it's getting long that way because we're getting to the middle. We're going to So a little bit at a time. We're going over that little bit of a hump, just trying to make sure we don't have any skip stitches. You go slowly over a kind of what you call what they say to use a hump jumper. You go slowly, you can kind of control that a little bit. I am almost to the end. And then we will do the next part so that we can put our Peltex in. Now, this is one reason a lot of times y'all will see me sewing with a contrasting thread. I actually like sewing with a coordinating thread when I'm doing the turtle tote for one reason, and that's so that when you do the stitch in the ditch, you're not going to see it. So now we're at that last second side, and we are going to just sew down with an eighth of an inch, and we will stop right there. So we have that. So if you want to see, there is our zipper panel. Now what we are going to do now, I'm going to toss these, whoops, didn't mean to make y'all go downwards a little bit. We are going to start at the seam. So if you can see, there's my seam right here. And we are going to stitch what's called stitching in the ditch, which you're stitching in the seam that has been previously sewn. And it will go through, and that's why we had to make sure that the lining and the exterior were matched up with each other so that when you're sewing this, you are sewing and doing stitch in the ditch for both layers. Okay, so we're just going slowly. I always say don't rush when you're doing the stitch in the ditch because you want to make sure you're staying in the what they call the ditch or the seam because it hides that stitching. You should, if you take your time and stitch in the ditch correctly, you won't even know that there is stitching there, other than the fact that it gives the added security and basically makes a separate part from the other one. Let's see, let's take these off and I can show you what I mean. So this one is sewn together. And you can see we have a channel that we'll put our Peltex in just a minute. But if you look at the seam, you can't see my stitching at all, which is the whole point. It also strengthens that seam as well. So that's another way to do that. Okay. So we will do the other one because we've already sewn our two inseams by doing that at the beginning. But we are going down this other seam. I said you go as fast or slow as you need to go for this, just to make sure that your seams are correct. We'll take these off. And we have three separate compartments that we are going to put our Peltex in. Now, one thing I do have my Peltex, and if you see, just to make sure I grab the right ones, I've got it labeled side and front, and I have one labeled back as well. Now, at this point, if you wanted to, just so you don't forget, you could go ahead and add your zipper pulls. So I'll go ahead and do that. Put that little Gryffindor lion back on. Make sure they're even. Pull it through. And I always have people who tell me, "How are you putting that on?" It's just called years of practice. You can use a zipper jig. You can use, when I first started doing zippers, I used a fork of all things until I got where, you know what, I can do this better by hand than I can using something else helping me. And that's a personal thing. So everybody has to learn how to do zippers on their own to the best of their ability. But so there's my zipper pulls on there. All right. So we are going to put our, now I have measurements in my pattern for the Peltex. However, it's a possibility your Peltex might be slightly too big or too tall, and you put it in there, and if it's not, you trim it down. It happens that way sometimes. I mean, it's even some of the best patterns, your seams will actually get in your way. So in this case, you have the vinyl seam. Sometimes it's easier to not have to deal with the vinyl seam. So I'm trying to make sure it's out of my seam allowance, which yet again is a 1/4 inch. Okay, so I am going to turn this way again. We are stuffing this down in here. I'm actually going to take it off and trim off about 1/8 of an inch from the top, mainly because that vinyl is in there. In other words, your seam that you have folded down from sewing it to the zipper tape, it does not want to let it lay as flat or go up as high as I would like it to go. So I am going to do that for both of my side pieces, but it fits both side pieces. And there's nothing wrong with using a zipper jig in it. Um, I've never had one. Like I said, I used a fork for the first few times, and I got so irritated with them that I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna figure out how to do this without using anything else. All right, so trimmed both of those side pieces down. So I'm gonna slide it back in. Oh, that's better. And the main reason I trimmed it, so if you can see, there is my Peltex, and the distance between that, I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I want a little bit above that so I'm not getting that Peltex in my seam. Yeah, some people, it has to be a certain jig, and there's nothing wrong with that either. Um, like I said, it's all a personal preference and what makes it easier for you than, oh, this is so much better than the other. Nobody can tell you what's going to be best for you. And that's what I try to tell people. Everybody has their own learning curve and everything. Um, some people pick up some things faster. I actually don't have a problem with zippers, like sewing zippers. They don't bother me. But I started out sewing clothing, and if you can sew in a visible zipper, I actually prefer invisible zippers over regular zippers in clothing, which tells you probably my comfort with regular zippers, period. I've just done a lot, whether it be clothing or bags, because I've been sewing bags now for about a little over 10 years. So we have our other side. So we have our other side piece, and we're just going to slide it in there like we did the other one. And I just kind of stuff it in there. So if you can see, we have our seam allowance is a little bit more than a quarter, and that's what I prefer. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is trim down the front for the same reason. Now it is longer because it's our front piece, but it was the same height as the other. So if I'm trimming about a eighth of an inch on those, I'm going to do the same on the front piece. And I never trim the back piece until I'm ready to put the back piece in, because you'll see it is a whole different size, different than the so if you were to take, they're the same width, but a lot shorter in the front than it is the back. So now we're going to put the front piece in. Excuse me. Get a hairball or something. Trying to get something to drink. Apparently, I got dust or something. Happens sometimes. But so we've got, and see that middle piece fit in perfectly. And with us already having trimmed it, it's not an issue. But now I just need to put clips again just so I can get this closed up. And we're going to baste across it with an eighth of an inch seam allowance. And what that does is it actually closes up these little compartments, and then you have a completed zipper panel piece. Or this is not the gusset, so it's, I guess that's be the closest thing is to call it a gusset. Well, I just call it the zipper or the center once it's actually together. All right, so we are going to clip across. And basically, this is just to hold my fabric in place again. Yes, I know I've top stitched and it's not really going to be moving anywhere, but I've found if I don't clip it while I'm doing the basting, something gets folded up or something weird. And then I have to take stitches out. And less times I have to do that, the better. All right, so we have that clipped. We're just going to take and baste that with an eighth of an inch. So I'll move y'all to the sewing machine. Okay, we're going to baste about, like I said, I use a narrow zipper foot, which is a natural eighth of an inch seam allowance. So I just put my zipper foot to the edge of the fabric and just sew. So we shouldn't run out of any bobbin thread in this one, because this was a full bobbin before I started tonight. I most definitely go through two or three for this bag normally, but that's when we get into the attaching the top and bottom and the binding. Now, next week, I may go ahead and attach the webbing in the meantime so that I can go over how to attach the top and how I do binding. And then all that's left is to attach the bottom and do the binding there, and your bag is complete. I mean, if y'all also don't have to sit here while I rivet everything and well, I'm not actually sewing. I do when I do straps that are attached to the bag, I do actually use double-sided tape and stitch it down as well as brain's not gonna work. Rivet it down just because since this is a large bag, you want a lot of structure and hence the reason all the Peltex. All right, so the next part is that we are going to, so we have this completed. This is all one piece, nothing's open anymore. We are going to attach our back to this. And I usually start on the right hand side. And we are going to grab our front, our exterior, and a lining piece. And you make sure to match up. Now, if there were a top or bottom, you need to make sure it's going the same direction as your other. But since this is a solid material, it's not so much an issue. But I am going to clip it together. And whenever you do this, you start at the bottom working up because any excess that is trimmed off of the back panel is done at the top above the zipper tape. So you will always match up at the bottoms first. So you can see where my zipper tape is up here. You'll always match up. So we are doing basically making a sandwich of our zipper panel in between our lining and exterior piece for the back. And like I said, I am just clipping this as I go. But use as many or as few clips as you want. If you're making this completely out of fabric, you could use pins. If I ever have the chance, I prefer pins over clips because pins are less likely to jump. Clips, if you test them a certain way, they'll break and they'll jump off. I've had them hit me in the face. This is the turtle tote. Where did I put my paper? This is one of my patterns. So this is the turtle tote, the total turtle tote. Yes, I know all the alliteration. So, and I don't think you were on here when I did show it. So this is mine that I made. So it's a pretty good size bag. And I used clear vinyl on top. And my pattern actually does explain how to do this. This was clear vinyl on the top instead of regular vinyl. And this will hold 2 medium and 3 small cubes on the inside. So I like my turtle tote. So I am going to one last clip. So that was my own choice was to have the clear top. I need to move this out of the way, otherwise I'm gonna knocking it over and have drink all over myself. All right, so we are going to go to the machine, and we've made our basically like little sandwich of the 3 layers. And we're going to sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance again. Like I said, I start at the top. And if you will notice, there will always be a little bit of extra materials above the zipper tape. That's fine because depending on how wide your zipper tape, it could be anywhere from a eighth of an inch to up to a 1/4 of an inch because not all number 5 zipper tapes are the same. Or if you're using a 4.5 inch zipper tape, or definitely if you're using number 3, like a number 3 is only an inch wide, whereas a number 5 is 1.25 inch wide. So I do this so that if you have that, you trim off the excess after we have the back fully attached. And that's one reason I said we don't trim down the Peltex yet till we know at that point. So we have the first sides attached. And so before we go any further, we are actually going to pull these out. Of course, I'm knocking stuff off. And we are going to do, and if you wanted to, you could trim off your excess zipper tape, but since it's contained, I don't see the point. Nobody will ever see it. You're the only one who's going to know it's there. And we are going to pull these fabrics wrong sides together, and we are going to top stitch the seam. I am making sure that my fabrics are pulled taut on the underneath. So you are sewing through 2 layers at this point, 2 layers of vinyl and 2 layers of lining. So I just take my time to make sure that my seam is nice and even for the top stitching and that it looks nice and pretty, because this is something you're seeing when you look at the bag. Okay, so we are at the end. Don't forget to reverse stitch and trim your threads. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to match our other sides. Now, this is more of an issue like when you're doing the cube or such. I do what you have to make, kind of like a breeder roll. So I always match the exteriors first, because you're going to have to wrap the lining around to the other side. Makes things a little more difficult. So I'll show you what I mean. This is actually probably the easiest one of all my patterns that do this technique, because of the size of it. So now what we're going to do, we have our exteriors together, but we need our linings. So I have what I call a burrito roll. Basically, I roll up the middle of the zipper panel and I pull my lining over to the side. So if you see it when it's folded over, it is kind of making like a little burrito. So now that that's done, I will clip that to the lining of the other side. Okay, so do that. And that also means that's not in your way now. We are going to sew this. So we are clipping this together. And then we will actually top stitch the other side, which gets to be a little more difficult because now it's a circle. And we will also baste together the bottom so that we can put our Peltex inside. And so this Peltex actually goes in through the top, unlike the previous, which goes in through the bottom. So what we're going to do now that it's sewn, we will turn it right side out. And if you can see, it's just a big empty hole, but it's together now. But we've top stitched one side, we need to top stitch the other. So the easiest way is I find is to take it back behind the needle and then pull it forward to start at the top, just like we did the other one. But then we're pushing the bulk through as we top stitch. And I find that's a lot easier than trying to do it the other way around. So trying to, so we are pulling it taut, the lining and the vinyl. So we have that nice pretty top stitch. Like I said, we are sewing our top stitch at 1/8 of an inch. And what I will actually do, instead of back stitching right here, I am going to back stitch. I'm going to go one step off just to the 1/8 of an inch mark. And I will go ahead and turn the bag since I have it like this and close up the bottom so that we can insert our Peltex. I hope you're doing well, Annette. Okay, so we're almost across and do our back stitch. Okay. I will turn you back to see me to show this next part. Thanks, Annette. All right, so we have our big zipper panel, but if you notice that peg panel still, but it's closed off, so now it's a pocket for us to put our Peltex in. So what I will do is stick my Peltex down in there. And it is a little narrower, and the reason this is a little narrower than the other is because it had two seams on each side, not just one seam. Okay. Actually, before we put the Peltex in, it's been in the 90s here too over in North Carolina. So, all right. So, if you can see, before we put our Peltex in, just so we can get an accurate measurement, if you see we have this little bit above the zipper. So, I'm going to take you to my, ow, something just dropped on my toe. I'll take you over to my table and we are going to trim that down using my big ruler. And I just go from the top of the zipper tape across. So I have a big ruler and I am going to line up my tops of my zipper tape with the on both sides, and then I will trim this down. All right, that's good and done. All right, so if you can see, I have trimmed it even with the zipper tape. On both sides. So now we will put our Peltex in. Yeah, last week we had a day, last Monday, and it was only in the 70s. It was glorious with very little humidity, and that has come back full force now. And I look at how much I've got there. I need to take about an eighth of an inch off of this one too. See, it's not always guaranteed, depending on how much you have to trim off. I trimmed off about an eighth of an inch of material off, so it makes sense I'd have to trim off about an eighth of an inch of Peltex. And yes, you can be exact and take this over to the table and trim off your eighth of an inch. But I can kind of eyeball at this point in my sewing career to trim off an eighth of an inch. Well, that's cool, Melody. But yeah, it's a zipper tape I've had. I actually have some for every house. I'm actually a Ravenclaw. My daughter's a Gryffindor. I have some Slytherin and I have some Hufflepuff. But it's called, I don't know if I can get more of it because I think the one I got this from is no longer in business. So I use it sparingly. But I still have a decent amount of Gryffindor because, like I said, my daughter's a Gryffindor. So, all right. So now that I have stuck my, and if it looks like I've got a lot more space, you got to think I'm going to have to be able to push it out of my seam allowance here and here. So that's one reason I trimmed it down just a little bit more. So to finish up for tonight, we are going to sew this closed, and then I will show you exactly what it looks like completely, the zipper panel being complete. So we are going to, if my thing decides to agree with me. Plus, I'm a big Harry Potter fan. Actually, had a lot of fun at Epic Universe a couple weeks ago. So I like doing stuff special for Harry Potter fans. I need to singe this zipper tape a little bit so it doesn't fray. I accidentally cut it a little bit, but if you um burn it slightly, it won't be a problem, won't fray. Yeah, I got it where it won't fray. All right. All right. We won't talk about how many years I've been collecting zipper tape or how much zipper tape I own. Too much. But is it too much? It's kind of one of those. Mm. But just to show, here is our completed zipper panel. Yes, it's pretty good size. So, like I said, you can see my head. So, here are our zipper pulls. So, as you see, I didn't forget to put it on there, which is always a positive. And apparently, missed cutting a thread off. But as you can see, our zipper tape is even here. So we have our thing. So the next thing we do at this point before we set it to the side is that we will actually mark the centers. And I say that because that will be in the next part when we add our tops and bottoms. You have to make sure you know your centers of each side. So I am going to go ahead and mark my centers. There's that one. Where'd it go? Didn't I just mark that? Okay. Right there we go. That was it. I marked that center. So you match your seams of your front. And I'm going to use a silver Sharpie since this is black. You can get Haunted Mansion webbing at Emporium Threads. I'll show you what I have. Yeah, that's better. Silver on black shows up a lot easier, as you can see. All right. Because my bag I was making that I made myself is actually Haunted Mansion. So I will show you my webbing. And that's the same place that this Gryffindor webbing came from. So I'm marking my centers. And then I use those to, I need to mark it on both sides. I'm not thinking. It's called, you mark one side, but you need to mark both sides because you have a top and a bottom. That helps sometimes. You remember to do that. Okay, we are matching up our seams. All right, there is our center there. Can I see it? Yes, I can. All right, so now we're going to match up our centers here and mark our other the centers of the sides. And when you do your sides, your seams should match up as well of your front and back. So that's a good way to check yourself that you've got the exact center. Okay, so let's do our zipper tape. And let's get this again and do our zipper tape on the other side. And then we'll do the other side. Let's see, there is our center marks. Yay, seams match up. Always nice when things match up when you double check them. Now let's do the other one. That's why I always check the centers and do it again before. And there we go. And it's in my seam allowance. And I haven't done it yet, but you will also mark your centers on this as well. Centers. And as you see, I've already rounded my corners. I did that preemptively before I did the live. And that is where I'm going to stop for tonight. But just to show you, Melody, this is the Foolish Mortal webbing. Ah, before it attacks me. Foolish Mortal webbing I have from Emporium Threads. Of course, it's upside down. But this is actually really cool. It says Foolish Mortals. But yeah, so if y'all want to see, since I don't know if y'all were here at the beginning, we have the inside, which does have cubes inside. And I have the clear top cube that actually matches. I have a Beetlejuice clear cube that matches that's kind of squished at the moment. And I have clear vinyl mini ones. See a different Haunted Mansion. And I have a Pusheen sewing one. I do rotate these out from time to time, but I use this to carry a lot of my sewing stuff everywhere because I can fit everything in here. But as you can see, Haunted Mansion Chicago Screws wallpaper. So yes, I do really like Haunted Mansion. It's one of my favorites. So I will see y'all next week where we will do the next part of the turtle tote and do all that. I think at once upon a time they came from Wizard Stitchery, but I'm not positive on that. It may have been from uh, a place that's no longer in business. I don't remember. I've had them a long time, and I held them off for a certain project, and they ended up going on this. And I didn't even have enough to do all of them. I only did the top set of things as the Haunted Mansion screws, and everything else are rivets. Um, so I don't remember exactly. Like I said, it might have been Wizardry Stitchery, or um, there was a shop that I used to be a striker for called Zippity Doodah. They went out of business a couple years back, so that might be the place that they were. I don't remember though. Um, if I can maybe look into my records and find it, but I don't know off the top of my head. I hope y'all have a good night, and I will see y'all next week.